Hello, everyone. My name is Gabi Motuba, and you are tuned in to the Listening Threshold, where we bend the world to the sounds of our own voices. Now, as I promised, this week is a very special edition, and I am bringing to you directly from the Seabrook Theatre is the panel discussion that was hosted by the Transatlantic Jazz Exchange and the 2026 Artist in Residence program. So, this is a panel discussion that was hosted by the TAJE, and it was really incredible, really insightful. And I want you guys to just listen in and hear all the ideas that were being discussed. And I really wanted to share this as part of this week's episode. So, on the panel was myself, Gabi Mutuba, was Siama Kuzeni, was Melvis Santa, the Cuban vocalist and percussionist, and was Puti Sepuru. And together we were in discussion with the amazing Brenda Sassani, speaking on things sound, mentorship, the transatlantic exchange, and the futures of sound, musicianship as it pertains to women in the jazz industry. I want you guys to listen in. Let me know your thoughts afterwards. And yeah, do enjoy. Peace and love.
Yeah. Man, the piano, I think the piano is a voice of its own, and I mean, I'm literally listening to everyone speaking, and I think it's able to translate so much, but I'm also just thinking about what Malvin was saying in the sense that it offers like a particular accent, and it allows one to tell a story. But I also think the piano in particular is so layered because it's the melody, it's the harmony, it's the rhythm. You can tell it all in one, but as much as with the voice also, depending on, your skill. But I think in varying ways, our instruments allow us to sing. They allow us to sing home. They allow us to sound home. And the more you know about yourself, the more you know about your instrument, the more you're able to articulate that story. I really can't add too much onto what Ususia said because she's about summed it up here.
Well, I mean, now that we are here, this is fabulous because I think I can hear you nodding to each other. You hear each other very well. And I think the universality of that is part of the outcomes of why we're here, is to actually realize that everywhere we go, we come across the same need for humans, this need for this form of expression. So I'm going to jump into a different question altogether, the Transatlantic Jazz Exchange in this particular moment, because I truly believe that, I had something that I wanted to say, which had to do with the fact that somehow the sound survived across the oceans, and we're sitting here because of that. And we're sitting here as well as women, right? But I wanted you to give me a summary of what you believe this exchange has accomplished. What was your findings? I mean, individually, having done various workshops, engaged with one another. I think when I walked into the room, I found you talking about the questions I was asking. What's the purpose of this exchange, the word exchange itself?
For me specifically, it's a confirmation, it's reaffirmation. The way I learned music, I first came to music not as an end purpose. Music was a mean for communication with the intangible, a mean for soothing the community. I learned music through the community, being part of rituals, being part of popular celebrations. There was always music, and that would be the element that would bring people together. You wouldn't think, where are you from? You are here because you are connected through the music. And when I'm saying people as families and everywhere, you wouldn't stop to think who is present unless that person, brings something musically. So there is this intangible elements and qualities that are bringing community together. And it's a practice that there's nothing that you have to say about it. It's just there for you to be part of it. Elders and children are welcome in the same space. As long as you have something to say, the floor is yours. And when I say music, what comes with music, dance and play and community, just everything belongs together. There is no separation. It's really, but beyond that, there is this sense of togetherness. So I think that has shaped the way I see art. It has, yes, the technical part of it. It has you have to study, you have to understand what's going on, you have to learn the different ways of understanding. But why are you doing that? What are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing to the floor? Is it for healing yourself? Is it for healing others? Or are you connecting with, the elements? Why are you doing music? It can't just be a paper. It can't just be, if you don't like it, don't do it. Why are you doing it? It's because you want to be famous, or it's very important to have a purpose. That's how I see music. And Transatlantic Jazz Exchange, there is a purpose behind. We are bringing memories, we are reconnecting, and I think that it's an ongoing process. So this is a very, very good opportunity to start searching back and reconnecting with ourselves. That's so far.
Maybe to add to that, we were having a conversation upstairs about what does exchange mean, And if you think about exchanging an item with someone, for you to agree to the exchange, you have to see value in what the other person has, right? And some of you were in the rehearsal earlier. I mean, we all have different stories, and as much as the majority of us are from here, we all have different stories, but there's also like a midpoint where our worlds collide in a beautiful way, or they merge rather, because collision is violent. so they merge beautifully. But I think the beauty of this project, and this is my second year involved with the exchanges, if I think about being part of it, you have something to say, people believe they need to listen to what you have to say, but you also want to hear their response. And if you are part of the master classes or the different sessions or the different workshops, it's not about master to those who need to learn, it's about that exchange. And so every single one of us has a story to tell. And I think there was a moment earlier where Sis Malvis was saying, Blue Bolero, for example, and it's like, hey, Abdullah, right? We all know Abdullah, but we have different thoughts around that, different interpretations based on our story, and she was able to lock something in. We could dance to it, and the exchange began, right? And so for me, this is about like acknowledging, and not as it was forced back then, but it's like a reclamation of sorts, right? Where it's like we articulating sounds of home, we're sounding our different experiences, and we are actually allowed to exchange it in a way now where it's not in that context, but I'm able to say, sure, there's a wealth of experience, but at the same time, it's almost like, dare I say, almost like we shortchanged a bit, because exchanging takes time. It's not like, it's almost like I was saying, I wish you could sit in the music and we could all get to also just take from that. But I'm also fully aware that someone has to start such projects, you know. And I think there's a beauty about initiating something of this nature, of this magnitude. And also, my hope is that people will catch on, but that we'll also be able to do it in like just a way where we can sit in it, sit in the exchange, because there's definitely a value to learning about other cultures and also sharing our culture as well.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Perhaps I think it's maybe valuable to say I think the reason, I think where we find resonance with, South America and Africa is our desire to decenter kind of Western priorities. Within the academy, within our vocal practices. This is at the core. So I think for us, where we meet, it's like we're trying to we're trying to, like I say, decenter Western priorities because we have that experience. And I think sound is such an interesting thing in like when one is thinking about world building. We are the embodiment of this idea of what would it look like to decenter the West sonically through the voice. What would that sound like? We are already in that practice because we use priorities that are not of the West. The idea of competition is not something we're interested in. The idea of, upward mobility is not something that we're interested in. And that comes through in our music. And I think our experience is trying to show us if this is true, that, a priority or an empire is built, then something else can also be built. But it's like, at what end do you build this idea? At what end do you influence something that, that becomes inherited by you guys? What kind of environment must you be in order to ask these particular questions? Because I think what is interesting about South Africa and Cuba is that, it's like an amalgamation of many cultures, many information that is not, this is a privilege. Our experiences here is a privilege that we get to, meet Melvis and like walk in the hall and perhaps sometimes bump into Sia Makuzeni and then walk down, and then sometimes, you're bumping into Benjamin Jafta or something like that, who have been outside, who have heard what it sounds like to decenter, and I think we are in that place where it's like we're trying to build the new thing. And it's always a negotiation, because the infrastructure is not there yet. But the principles, I think that is the most important thing for us. It's like, how does home become a place of principle, as opposed to just this rigid idea that sticks to just me, or, that stays in one place, How do I transfer my principles and say, okay, in order to produce a sound like Gabi's sound, it's not the sound itself, but these are the principles that you can, explore yourself in order to produce something. Yeah.
That was, yeah.
So I think for me, just looking at how we went about our exercise today, I'm very happy because this is usually my world. I tell a lot of people that I live in the world of improvisation, through play, but improvisation through also being in the present moment with whomever I'm doing that with. And what I love is what I believe today was quite poignant is the universal, like it's very universal language that we all applied. We all coming from different shades of it because all of us have walked different paths, but without having to do too much except have a lot of trust in the communication that we gave ourselves today. I think it's very clear that this particular practice, music, is quite universal. It to a degree that sometimes translation is not necessary. So I'm very happy that we were able to kind of find each other, you know, in that light, and that it's not actually about the Western pedagogy element or anything like that. We are drawing from a lot of elements of self, and that also ties back to culture. So, you know, how I look at life and some of the material that I've obviously grown up with does speak through in my music, same as it does for Melvis as well as Gabi. And so I think this is a continuation for me. In this universal language, we found a means to perhaps have a dialect, you know, that kind of speaks to all of us, even though we come from different backgrounds. So I love being in this world, and I continue to put myself in uncomfortable positions because it can be nerve-wracking. Like, you know, we really, I think most of us, we spoke about it when we walked in, we were like, well, we've got the material and we have some base, but it doesn't have to go there. And yet when we were in the actual play and practice of it, not much needed to be said. That's something really, really poignant for me in terms of like collaborating with people.
Well, I was given 20 minutes, and I think we've used that 20 minutes. So it's an opportunity for us to ask questions. But as we plan to ask questions, I really have one of my own, which is, and it centers around the two questions, because literally we're just answering one question today. There's so much that can be done, right? The familiar inside the distance, you know, that across the Atlantic, something survived. Though it may not be intact, it is recognizable. Call and response, polyrhythms, the body in the groove, right? So when you listen to Afro-Cuban music, for instance, what feels familiar to you as a South African musician, not intellectually, but instinctively? But also, when you first encountered South African music, for instance, what did you recognize? What felt like home and what felt different? Because I think one of the conversations we're not having is that the displacement and the migrations, forced or otherwise, they also took the sound elsewhere. I remember I was in conversation with David Sanchez, and he kept on talking about everything like bomba, domba, you know, and I'm like, these words, I speak Xitsonga, me, I grew up in Chichangani. These words exist if you go to Mozambique, the type of dance, and, you know, if you are in Gazankulu and all of that. And I'm like, why are we not talking also about those similarities? Because that's how we can also, you know, kind of forge that continuum, if anything. But if you would like to take a bite at it, you're welcome to do so. But I'd like to also open it to the room for questions. Thanks. Great panel. Great panel indeed.
Happiness, you have a question?
Oh, I thought you had a question. No, I thought you had a question. Well, since you threw the mic right in my face, forcing me to say something.
You should go.
I just want to say thank you to Brenda for being the moderator. Brenda's an international writer and famous radio personality. Her reputation precedes her. I've had the opportunity to hang out with her in South Africa on many occasions and also in New York. And to the panel, I want to thank all of you. And part of what Transatlantic Jazz Exchange, what we did this time, for the first time, we actually had a young lady coming on as part of the residency Melvis, and she was very strong about having women involved in this. And as we all know, women in music, especially in jazz, they don't get the recognition that they deserve. So I'm happy, and Nasi is happy that we have students here to acknowledge the importance and the greatness of what women bring to the music. And all of you understand that, and the young men that are in here, you know, when you're forming your own bands and starting your own thing, don't be afraid to bring a woman into the fold, you know, so because they have a lot to offer, and they can play their behinds off just like you can, all right? So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Ron. Actually, yes. If there's no...
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So obviously, like I think a lot of us, we come not only from being educated, but from being, you know, having mentors. And for women, I'm wanting to ask the panel. Anybody can answer. Like, you know, we always hear about this. You know, I mean, myself included. Like, we always go with a lot of people. So, like, how do you find mentorship as in the jazz, or not just the jazz world, in the music world, like, important? And you know, do you also recommend it, like, that people that are coming up consider to, you know, take other people under their wing? Because I know for the men, there's been a culture of that, you know. Especially in the jazz world, and I wonder if women feel that that's a necessity maybe also.
So my entire jazz education, school of life situation would not be possible without mentors. If it wasn't for, you know, very, very incredibly important people like Zamgawana, Themba Mkhize, there were so many actually, Victor Ndoni, Winston Mangungu. All these men saw something at a time when I wasn't probably there, I wasn't thinking about perhaps even pursuing it to that level that, okay, this is really what I want to do. So it's extremely important, and I'm not saying that to maybe kind of make it as if it was only male figures who were involved, because over time then I'm learning certain other things and other elements around arts organization, you know, with everybody else that I'm working with, but for the purpose of actually learning the art itself, yeah, it just, I would not be the Siyama Kwezeni that I am today without that. And I think it's the same reason I am extremely passionate about then having to pass the baton on. I'm sure there's a number of students here at Wits who know that, you know, I would, when I pique my interest, then have to be the one who bothers them, and then they come back and they bother me, but we've got like this very beautiful relationship. And at times, yes, I get busy, but I always let them know that the door is open. Because, yeah, it's very important for us to be able to continue with that tradition. Yeah.
Can I add something to that? I also think that in 2026, we should be really aiming for deeper questions in terms of gender. Not to diminish your question or anything like that, but we really need to move forward the conversation and not stay in this space of, but do you need me, or am I important to you, or do you, like, say it, I'm important. You know, it's like, it's kind of a little, you know, if we stay with that mindset, we never get to the next step. And there is a reality that we all have to admit. Women historically, so in the society and everything, has been dealing with a set of duties that had interfered in their development, opportunity as well, and I'm not talking with the spirit of victimization, I'm talking facts, and that's a conversation that is a global conversation, to the point that the sound that we consider the master's sound is very masculine, if you think about it. The sound of jazz that we all idolize is a male sound. But that's not the problem. The problem is the erasure of the women that made part of those sounds. Because we all love Thelonious Monk. It's one of my favorites, about power. But nobody knows Mary Lou Williams. And Mary Lou Williams was the one that teach Thelonious Monk. But again, it's not about who teach who. We should get that past with 2026 is what can we do to bring equity, not equality, because we are not the same. And we should be okay with that. There is a set of characteristics, there is a set of sensibilities that come with being a woman. There is a set of characteristics and skills that come with being a man. There's nothing wrong with that. We should be okay existing, coexisting. It's not that we need to get rid of one so we can exist. If we have still those kind of conversation, so we should be asking, what can we do to find a middle ground where, we should have really true conversations about what if we give space for the sonic sound to shift as opposed to hold everyone to this standard that is actually very masculine, Like I say, nothing wrong with that, but you cannot measure my value because you think that I play weak. Weak compared to who? Weak compared to what? You're not powerful enough. What you mean? Powerful enough for what? What are you trying to convey? As a woman, I'm not going to hit you in the face. I'd rather care for you and tell you, baby, as opposed to, So why would I play if my instinct is telling me, what you need is a kiss, you need a hug. I know that's what you need, So we really have to express from who we are. And the truth is that we've been trying, and I say we, not literally us, because this is an open space, and we are artists and we are musicians, but it's usually women trying to match, or compensate, or, so the conversation shouldn't be, does your master, or someone that teach you, you need to recognize, of course, that's no question, and we are not talking about an all-female world that doesn't make sense. We shouldn't be in that space, 2026. We have to learn about ourselves as individuals, and women have so much to learn of ourselves because we've been doing so much.
Unless you want to say something. After Mark's question. Because it is the question that I wanted us to wrap up with. Okay. Which is that, the same thing that you are saying, both of you, that jazz history has often been narrated through men's names, but women have always shaped its interior, So this is maybe this brings to the fore, authorship. All of you sitting here, you author your own sound as women in music and jazz, and you don't interpret it, but you define, and maybe let's just, because that is part of what you're saying, we need to transcend and move beyond stating the obvious. And women are there to define, because that's the role, as you say, that women are meant to play. I'd like your comments on that as we wrap up. Thanks.
I had something to say about that, especially to the young ladies. I think that, when I think about music, I think about sound. The difference perhaps between myself a nurse, a doctor, engineer, astronaut, is interest. If it's a question of sound, it's a question of interest. I'm interested in this thing, and because of that, I'm going to pursue it. That is mentorship. It's interest. I'm interested, meaning I'm paying attention. I'm going to learn whether I like it or not. I'm going to grow whether there's a mentor or not. If I am interested, if this is a visceral experience that I'm having with sound, if it's a question of sound, I don't need mentorship. I don't need I don't need guidance. My body, my story is guiding me. You see? I mean, for an example, also with sound, we were talking earlier, and someone was asking, how do you know if you found your sound? There are many exercises. This is why you come to institutions, We do transcriptions. You listen to music, your favorite song. You sing along with your favorite song. But of course, as a vocal teacher, I always say, if it hurts, that's an indication that you're probably off alignment. Okay? So there are tools that we have that we can use for ourselves to keep engaging with the outside, to keep engaging with our ear, to keep engaging with our sound. That's really all we need. And also in terms of this idea of mentorship, sorry, I just wanted to just riff back a little bit there. Some of us, of course, have had the privilege of mentorship, but also because of the kind of the societal idea that Malvis was saying, just in terms of the safety, right? This idea of a male, because this is a male-dominated industry, we are not separate from what's happening in society just because we're musicians. There is, you know what I'm saying? It's not like we're having this incubated experience. We are the people of outside. So we have to consider what's happening outside. If there are strained relations between genders, it's gonna come out in our interpersonal relationships. So this is just just a little bit of caution, a little bit of, if you're seeking mentorship, this, older male and younger female, this relationship as perceived outside is not the healthiest, as perceived, as experienced. And this is just something that's happening in society. It needs to grow. This relationship needs to grow, right? We need to relate to each other in a better way. And then it will permeate within our own interpersonal relation. Even on stage, we will relate to each other better. But until then, also, mentorship, I think, is a question of just trajectory. If your question is trajectory, how do I get from this place to this place? How do I grow my how do I grow my knowledge of the industry? What path do I want to take? There's so many ways to engage this question outside of mentorship. You read books, you observe people, you follow people on social media, you see how they move in the world. That is also access to a mentorship experience. Without that, without that that potential violent experience. And like Malvis was saying, we don't want to interrupt your growth. That's the worst thing that could happen. And so many of our sisters and brothers have had these interrupted experiences because of certain interpersonal relationships. But like we say, there's other ways to think about mentorship outside of that. And like I said, if it's a question of sound, it's going to happen anyway. If it's a question of trajectory, there are many ways to observe people, to observe Sia, to observe Malvis, to observe our careers and the questions that we're asking. Yeah.
Earlier on, I started on the conversation of the diaspora singing. I wanted to ask to end on that note. If the diaspora is singing right now,
we'll end it off there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you again for tuning in to the Listening Threshold, where we bend the world to the sounds of our own voices. Peace.